Okay, everyone, we are back here with a quick update. There was news out this morning. This is November 21st from Fathom Nickel. They've had the batch of assays from their Gochager Lake project has been released for their final batch of assays, rather, have been released. And so Ian has gratefully or graciously rather agreed to just pop on quick and just provide some overview and context for us so we understand what we're looking at, and we can discuss how these fit into his own understandings of what's going on under the ground at Gochager. So Ian, this is a natural thank you for showing up, and how are you today?
Doing really well, Matt. Always pleased to have a discussion with you. Lots of fun.
Yeah, excellent. No, and I'm looking forward to this one too. These results are, I think they set the table in a very interesting way. But let's just, I've got just 4 or 5 questions for you here. It doesn't have to be super long or arduous. Do you just want to start? And rather, you know what? I'll pause right now and I'll bring up. I just have a couple of images that I've collected here, and I'll bring these up just so people have just a little bit of context or some visual framing for this conversation. And maybe I'll just, Ian, pardon me, but I'll explain what I'm showing here. We have the first slide here is kind of the before, right, where this is your conceptualized model of what you were chasing here at Gochager this year. And then what you have on the right-hand side is kind of your during image, and you can tell me if my pithy explanations are incorrect. And then the second slide here that I'll get to in a moment, same thing, you kind of have the during, and then this is what you released today here. This is what you're working from, so that we can kind of just see how these drill collars and the assay tables that I'll bring up in a moment here as well kind of all intersect. Anyway, with that kind of contextual information out of the way, Ian, do you just want to just run through, if you don't mind, this discussion about what did you find, right? I mean, how did these results match your expectations going into it? I mean, did you find what you wanted to find? Were there, surprises or new pieces of information, good, bad, or indifferent, that maybe you want to share with us?
Yeah, really good question, Matthew. Really good question. We went out there and if I can use the first 3 drill holes, number 5, and number holes 6 and 7. So these were sort of aggressive step outs on either side of that intercept that was in 23003. And so we were envisioning a strike orientation, sort of 35, almost 50 meters to the east of the intercept in 23003. And then holes 6 and 7, they were positioned in such a way that they were 50 meters to the west. And we drilled 2 holes from the same platform there. And one was shallow, one was steeper, on the assumption if we did intersect the mineralization in the first hole, we'd be checking the down plunge extension with the second hole, which was hole number 7. And as we know now, 5 was a little bit too far to the east, and 6 and 7 were a little bit too far to the west. So that changes the strike orientation, our anticipated orientation of the mineralization in hole number 3. So instead of things being, northeast to easterly, they are more northeast now. So they're actually closer to north-south than we had anticipated. So that's good. There's a bit of a famous expression, technical success. The bankers don't like technical successes, but this is what you got to do. You got to get this thing figured out. So that helped us immensely. And then we kind of rejig things, conductor. And then 10, we came right back at that intercept in 23003 to try and see what it looked like up plunge and down plunge. And we did. We recognized that mineralization in hole number 10. Hole number 9 was, we've got conductivity in front of the drill hole. So that was a new development. And, just before we started, Matt, we were talking a little bit about this fault structure. So on that image on the left-hand side, that is our composite cross-section. And we are consistently seeing this fault. It's a shallow fault. That's this gray plane that you see in the composite section. We have seen mineralization on the hanging wall side right up to the fault, and we have actually recognized mineralization on the footwall side right up to the fault. So there's some kind of displacement in there. Now, is this high-grade mineralization displaced that we see in 23003 and 23010? That's to be determined. But there's a big gap in there between holes 9 and 10 that we could probably fill in and encounter more of this mineralization that we saw in 23003 and more of it that we see in 230.
Yeah, I mean, I think that you expressed it well, right? I mean, you're in the pursuit of mastery here, right? And so I think that this is a classic example of and this is me editorializing and ultimately just asking you a leading question, so you'll forgive me, but these are results that the headline numbers, that I'm not sure if you just see this press release come across your desk and you're not familiar with the story, you're going to say, oh, it's not bad, right? But I think that the context here is really critically important to me because, again, as you discuss, it confirms your working model, right? That what you are predicting to find is ultimately what you're finding, like you say, with a little bit of offsets from faulting here and there. But that for me, I was actually quite excited this morning when I got up and was kind of running around and reading this, and to me, it struck me that from our previous conversations, you found what you said you were going to find. Is that kind of a fair statement?
Yeah, no, I think that's accurate. And I think what's encouraging too is, the historic resource speaks for itself. The 4.3 million tons at a grade of just under 0.3% nickel. So there's a lot of this disseminated mineralization in this deposit, and what we're seeing now is there appear to be, instead of it being just disseminated through the whole thing, it is sort of controlled by these. I use the term chutes to describe the higher grade mineralization, but the lower grade mineralization is the chute itself as well. And we're starting to recognize that these chutes are a function of the type of gabbro that we're seeing. So, we and every one of these disseminated halos, we are seeing semi-massive sulfides within these disseminated halos. And hole number 10 had 3 separate broad zones of disseminated mineralization. Hole 5 has a broad zone of disseminated mineralization with some pretty nice looking sulfides in it. So we can come underneath hole number 5 now and continue to extend these higher grade sections to depths. And so, I've been saying all along that the only way we're going to get this historic grade up into something that potentially is going to be an economic deposit is we're going to have to find more of these good zones of semi-massive to massive sulfides, these zones that are running, 1% up to 3%. And that way we'll be able to increase this overall grade because we are focusing on the higher grade sections, the semi-massive to massive sulfide sections that we know are very conductive. And the borehole EM, as we get smarter with this thing, we'll be able to pinpoint our drill holes and hopefully with a consistent azimuth too. So this is another important takeaway is, what is this orientation? We know it's steep, but we want to be perpendicular. So what is that azimuth? And looking at this plan map that you see here, 5 is close to probably the preferred azimuth. 9 is, I think another indication that we're getting close to this preferred azimuth. And whether we drill this from the southeast to the northwest or from the northwest to the southeast, that's something that we're still trying to fine tune.
Yeah, and that's, you reference I'm scrolling through my own notes here. You reference, hole 23010. You had two large intersections, and again, we don't know the true width here, so kind of cautionary tale there. But 87 meters at 0.37, nickel 09, copper and 03 cobalt, and then deeper down, 63 meters at 0.56 nickel. I mean, these are kind of sneaky good numbers, right? And as you say, the historical resource, I mean, these are above grade, and so to me, it strikes me that you are again increasing understanding in a way that maybe historically hadn't been there yet. And I guess maybe that's the question I want. Maybe I'll to transition here. I mean, you do kind of have two sorts of extremes with this batch of assays. You have this narrow, ultra high grade veins of massive sulfides. You got 3.25 nickel over 0.64 meters, 2.6 over 1.31. But then, as you've referenced here, these big, thick intervals of low-grade mineralization, right? Three holes with 60 meters or more each. Do you just want to, and you kind of already touched on this with the disseminated, but do you want to just discuss each of these in turn, and again, just provide context to what they mean to your working model, right? Because again, I think that to me, these are exciting because it suggests that your thesis that you kind of called your shot, right? And that's, to me, that's such an encouraging sign. But do you just want to discuss these ultra high grade veins, kind of what they mean to your exploration story and what they might be pointing towards?
Yeah, well, a couple of things there. I just want emphasize the consistency of the mineralization. So these 85-meter intervals. I'm using a 1,000 ppm nickel cutoff, and through that 85 meters, everything is running. Every sample. We sample a meter, sometimes up to 1.5 meters. We do recognize that there's some skinny diorite dikes, and they typically don't have a lot of mineralization. But for the most part, every single sample through that interval is running north of 1,000 ppm nickel. And some of the work that we're doing, and this is very early, and I'm going to be doing some some microprobe work, and we're looking at the pyrrhotite, and we're trying to figure out, okay, what is the nickel content in the pyrrhotite, and where is the cobalt? I think it's associated with pentlandite. But what this is getting a little ahead of ourselves, but I think it's important because I think it's safe to say this, Matthew. I mean, we've got to continue to do what we do, but every time we're in a boardroom, every time we're in discussions with people, it's not going to be us that are going to be the miners. It's going to be a big major, and so this is where I think some of these preliminary metallurgical studies that we're doing are going to be very, very important. So when we say something like, I think I'm getting off topic again here, Matthew, excuse me, but when I say things like, when we announce that we're dealing with nickel tenors that are comparable to the Sudbury nickel camp, I mean, that's important. That's something that the quote unquote the big guys are going to start paying attention to. And this consistency in the cobalt. Cobalt, goes without saying, is sneaky good. It's something that these big companies, they've got smelters that are perfectly aligned for this type of mineralization. So we need to continue to develop this. And so I guess, we're again, just on limited sort of petrography that we've done, this nickel that's in this mineralization is going to be very easily liberated. We're not seeing the nasties. We're not seeing, arsenic. We're not seeing bismuth. In fact, the good mineralization is low in magnesium, which is good, again, for, potential processing. So this is all part of what we're doing. But getting back to your question about the higher grade intervals, they are very, very important. And, I honestly think that the massive sulfides, the semi-massive sulfides that we're seeing, it's post-crystallization of this magma. So this is coming from a large pool of sulfides, and these soft breccias that they're sometimes termed, this style of mineralization that we're seeing. It's coming from something I think that's even bigger and better, and so it's important to continue to follow these 2 to 3 meter intercepts of where you get this nice semi-massive sulfide mineralization, and continue to follow these to depth, because right now, the hole number 9, for instance, that is the deepest intersection in the history of this deposit where you have something over 1% nickel. Granted, it was 3.25 meters, but that is the deepest intersection. Unfortunately, a lot of this historic record, all I have are just hand-drawn sections. But there's nothing that compares to 1.35% nickel over 3.25 meters in the historic record. So that just tells me that this thing is wide open. And, about 50 to 60, actually probably closer to 100 meters to the west, there was a drill hole drilled. It was hole 6721. And there's a big chunk of disseminated mineralization that had a couple of individual assays in there that are 1%. So that is another shoot that we haven't even got to yet. So I do think that learning as much as we can in this particular area will do us a lot of favors as we go forward. Hopefully, I answered your question.
I think you got there in the end. No, I mean, and then my hope was that you would provide context, and that's what you've done, right? So, I mean, it just strikes me that the further you kind of pull back the veil on these projects, the more that you find that there is to discover, right? And it's a good problem to have. I mean, for me, I guess that these, and this is harkening back to our previous interview, where these high grade veins, I mean, where are they coming from, right? I mean, this treasure map that is kind of developing in terms of finding, this is obviously not Mother Rottenstone different project, but trying to chase these things downward into their source to find high grade, right? To find that the proverbial mother, right? So we've talked high grade, we've talked disseminated. So in your conversation section of the news release today, you talk about that you have semi-massives, found at depth and remain open at depth. And I mean, again, you've kind of articulated on this already, but do you just want to respond? What does that mean to you, right? What is that suggesting or telling you about this deposit, or about this project, about this mineralization?
Yeah, well, a couple of things. I mean, it's open. I think it was very, very important that we demonstrated that there is potential below the, roughly 290 meters below surface is where they kind of cut things off historically. So we're now down, 340 meters below surface. So we've added a chunk of real estate there, if you will, that's mineralized, and it's very much open to depth. And again, just this increasing conductivity that we're seeing in our drill holes as we get deeper down. I think I've said previously, Matthew, the first thing that we're going to do in 2024 is tack on another 150, 200 meters on, I can think of 3 drill holes that just to get down a little bit further. And I suspect what we're going to find is we'll probably come into another zone of disseminated sulfides. And then within that zone of disseminated sulfides, we're going to see either more of the semi-massive to massive, or we're going to get into the massive. And the massive is what we saw in that vein in hole number 8. I think I shared that image with you, trying to describe the importance of these massive sulfide veins. There was a quote out of the paper done by Dr. Peter Lightfoot and Dr. Tony Naldret. They were recognizing veins that were anywhere from 20 centimeters to 550 centimeters, as far as 50 meters away to what we know now is the Voisey's Bay deposit. So, these are all important things as we continue to go a little bit deeper here. And how big is this intrusive? We're starting to recognize that there's an ultramafic component to it. We're starting to recognize that there's a mafic component to it. And we're recognizing that there's different textures within the intrusive itself, and mineralization tends to be favoring certain textures. So, as we get a little bit smarter with our geochemistry and with our, just visually recognizing these textures, we can start actually trying to design our geophysics to really pinpoint these specific things that we're looking for in this very large, very open intrusive.
And so, I mean, we're kind of circling to the end here. Just a kind of a quick smash and grab sort of interview here today. I mean, let's end with borehole EM, right? I mean, again, this is such a critical piece of the pie, or puzzle, rather. Pardon me. And of course, we've covered this the last couple of interviews. But again, I mean, we have data in front of us here now, and you already are seeing more targets, courtesy of the BHEM being developed, right? I mean, again, I'm just quoting from your conversation section, but high grade nickel, mineralization intersected in GL 23010 is contained within 2 discrete broad zones of disseminated mineralization. The encompassing halos and higher grade mineralized chutes within remain open for expansion to surface and to depth, as you've kind of just touched on. A third mineralized halo in 23010 was intersected starting at a depth of 260 meters and continuing to 297. And then here's the part that I was hoping to get to, or that I wanted to focus on, is mineralization within this interval is very consistent, and here too BHEM conductivity was interpreted to be building to the bottom of the drill hole, right? And so, I mean, you touched on it yourself. 2024 is going to see the lengthening of drill holes. BHEM continues to help you vector in and focus and fine tune what you're after, what you're pursuing. Do you just want to, just to end us here, you identified already a number of off-hole targets just from these assays. Can you just run through a couple and what you think that BHEM is telling you?
Yeah, well, again, hole number 8. Hindsight's always 2020, right? But knowing what we found out about hole number 8, and knowing that the direction we were drilling hole number 10. 10, for instance, to test what 8 is telling us off hole, 10 is a prime candidate to go deeper. And, this second zone of, the third zone of the disseminated mineralization, I got to circle back now and ask my geophysical buddy and say, look, what are we seeing from here to there? Are we seeing specific bumps in the conductivity suggesting that there is more of the semi-massive sulfides within that third disseminated zone? So these are things. I've shared the assays with him, and so he'll be able to utilize assays to tweak his overall observation. So instead of it being more broad, we can start getting a little bit more specific based on the mineralization. So, it can't emphasize enough, Matthew, just the importance of borehole EM, and again, something that we talked about previously is, people have looked at these borehole EM responses and they've gone, was this Raglan? No. Was this the Sudbury mining camp? No. Well, where's this? Well, this is in northern Saskatchewan. I went, oh, wow. I mean, these are some really, really big amplitudes. These are some big responses. And so I part of me, forever the optimist, I'm not sure that we've completely resolved some of these big conductive responses. Maybe hole number 9, 3.25 meters of 1.35. I mean, that's associated with conductivity that's running 12,000 Siemens. I'm not convinced that our 3.25 meter interval is explaining the strength of that conductivity. So, these are things. Again, I am starting to sound like a bit of a broken record, but you learn so much with every single drill hole, good or bad. And I really feel that this has just been a tremendous first kick at the can, if you will. And we've walked away with not only a world-class intercept in 23003, but, we have followed up with some other very, very good intersections. 12 meters of 1% nickels, nothing to sneeze at. 23003, you've kind of set the bar pretty high, but that's maybe not a bad problem. But anyway, so to just sort of wrap it all up, I just feel like we're so much smarter, and we can go about things very, very efficiently. Instead of kind of wildcat drilling to find stuff, we can be very, very specific based on our borehole EM. And maybe a very smart thing to do is just drill a couple of pilot holes, and let's pump these things down 600-700 meters and provide the pilot, to our discussion the other day, so that we can look around that drill hole and see what's going on down there at depth. Again, borehole EM and really good geology. I'm fortunate to have a fantastic group of consultants and field geologists working with us, and yeah, we're that much smarter, and looking forward to continuing the success.
Well, and I think that's as good a place as any to end it. I think, right? I mean, you've articulated and explained it perfectly. I mean, I think that you have a lot of interest in this story, and it strikes me that this 2024 winter campaign, it seems like you're just setting the table ever so delicately, ever so nicely for what could be potentially a very transformative drill campaign for you guys. So, I mean, I think that those sounds like your final thoughts to me. So, yeah, thank you for your time again, and I look forward to the next time.
I do as well, Matthew. Thank you very much.
All right, have a good day.
All right. Cheers.
Cheers.